Baby Veteran catches a large bear, dragging a heavy bag. Baby was shocked to see what's inside the bag. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning mist rolled through the valley, wrapping around the small wooden cabin like a soft blanket. Sunlight filtered through the tall pines, casting dappled shadows across the porch where little Noah played. At just 2 years old, Noah had earned the nickname Baby Veteran from his grandfather, a retired Army colonel who insisted the toddler had old eyes that had seen it all. The nickname stuck, especially since Noah approached everything with unusual focus and determination. Noah stacked smooth river stones with careful precision, his tiny hands working methodically while his parents prepared breakfast inside. The cabin sat near the edge of a winding river, the gentle sounds of rushing water mixing with birdsong. It was their first family vacation in the mountains, a chance to escape the busy city and breathe fresh air. Noah's head suddenly turned at a sound from the tree line, something heavy dragging across the forest floor. He stood up on unsteady legs, clutching his favorite wooden toy soldier. His eyes narrowed as he spotted movement between the trees. Something large and dark moved slowly, deliberately through the underbrush. The toddler's curiosity overcame any sense of danger. He carefully climbed down the porch steps, one small hand gripping the railing as he'd been taught. His parents remained inside, their voices drifting through the open kitchen window as they discussed hiking plans for the day. Noah toddled toward the tree line, his rubber boots making soft, squelching sounds in the dewy grass. He stopped at the edge of the yard, mouth falling open in wonder. There, not 30 feet away, moved a massive brown bear. Its fur glistened with morning dew, muscles rippling beneath its coat as it walked. But what captured Noah's attention wasn't the bear itself. It was what the bear was dragging. Behind the enormous creature trailed a large, worn canvas bag, its fabric dirty and torn in places. The bag scraped along the ground, catching occasionally on roots and rocks. Each time it snagged, the bear would pause, look back with what seemed like frustration, then give the bag another firm tug. Noah tilted his head, watching with the innocent curiosity only a child could maintain in the presence of such danger. The bear moved with purpose, not wandering aimlessly as bears often did when foraging. This bear had somewhere to be, and that bag, that very human-looking bag, was important enough to drag along. From inside the cabin, Noah's mother called out, "Noah, where are you, sweetheart?" But Noah didn't answer. He took another step forward, eyes fixed on the strange scene unfolding before him. The bear suddenly stopped, lifting its massive head to sniff the air. For one heart-stopping moment it turned and looked directly at Noah, their eyes meeting across the clearing. Noah didn't cry out or run. Instead, he simply stared back, clutching his toy soldier tighter in his small fist. The bear regarded him for what felt like forever before turning away, continuing its journey with the mysterious bag in tow. Without a second thought, Noah began to follow, drawn by a curiosity stronger than fear. The bear moved deeper into the forest, and the little boy followed at a distance, his bright red boots leaving tiny footprints in the soft earth. Whatever was in that bag, Noah was determined to find out. The sounds of the cabin and his parents' voices faded behind him as Noah entered a world of towering trees and dappled sunlight, following the trail of a bear and its strange heavy burden. What the bear was carrying, and why, would soon change everything for the little boy who had never known fear. Noah's small feet moved with surprising steadiness over the uneven forest floor. Twigs snapped beneath his boots, but the bear seemed too focused on its journey to notice the tiny figure trailing behind. The morning sunlight filtered through the canopy above, casting shifting patterns on the moss-covered ground. Noah breathed in the earthy smell of the forest, his eyes never leaving the bear and its mysterious load. The bear moved with determination, its massive body navigating the forest with surprising grace. Every few minutes, it would stop to readjust its grip on the bag, pulling at it with gentle care whenever it caught on something. Noah noticed that the bear wasn't treating the bag like food or prey. There was something almost protective in the way it handled its burden. After following for what seemed like ages to a toddler's sense of time, Noah stumbled on a root. He fell forward with a small yelp, catching himself on his hands. The sound echoed through the quiet forest, and the bear's head whipped around, dark eyes locking onto the source of the noise. Noah froze, his heart racing in his small chest. The bear stared at him, nostrils flaring as it took in his scent. Then, to Noah's surprise, the bear did something unexpected. It sat down on its haunches, still gripping the bag with one massive paw, and waited. It was as if the creature was giving the toddler time to catch up. Cautiously, Noah pushed himself back to his feet. His palms were scratched from the fall, tiny beads of blood forming on his soft skin, but he hardly noticed. He was transfixed by the bear's behavior. Everything his parents had ever told him about wild animals flashed through his mind. They were dangerous, unpredictable. Yet this bear seemed almost patient. "Bear," Noah said softly, one of the few words in his limited vocabulary. He pointed a chubby finger at the creature. The bear huffed in response, its breath visible in the cool morning air. Then it stood again, gave the bag another tug, and continued its journey, occasionally glancing back as if to ensure Noah was still following. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, panic was setting in. Lily Morgan had stepped onto the porch to call her son in for breakfast, only to find his rock pile abandoned and no sign of the toddler. "Jacob," she called to her husband, fear rising in her voice. "Noah's gone." Jacob Bennett burst through the cabin door, his face paling as he scanned the empty yard. He was just here. He couldn't have gone far. "His boots are gone," Lily said, pointing to the empty spot by the door where Noah's little red rain boots should have been. He went outside. Jacob's eyes darted to the tree line, and a chill ran down his spine. They had come to these mountains for peace, for a break from city life, but they were well aware of the wilderness surrounding them, and all the dangers it contained. "I'll check the river first," Jacob said, already moving. "You check around the cabin, see if he's playing hide-and-seek." As his parents began their frantic search, Noah continued deeper into the forest, following his unusual guide. The bear led him through a dense patch of undergrowth, the bag occasionally snagging on thorny bushes. With each snag, the bear would pause, carefully work the bag free, and continue. Noah noticed something shining from a tear in the bag, something metallic that caught the sunlight. His curiosity grew even stronger. What treasure was this bear guarding so carefully? The forest began to thin, and Noah realized they were approaching a clearing. The bear stopped at the edge, looking back at Noah once more before dragging the bag into the open space. In the center of the clearing stood an enormous hollow tree, its trunk split open by lightning or time. The opening was large enough for the bear to enter, which it did, disappearing inside with its precious cargo. Noah hesitated at the edge of the clearing, suddenly aware of how far he had wandered from the safety of the cabin. He clutched his toy soldier tightly, gathering courage from the small wooden figure. After a moment's hesitation, he stepped into the sunlit clearing. The grass here grew tall and wild, dotted with colorful wildflowers that swayed in the gentle breeze. Butterflies danced from bloom to bloom, and bees hummed busily. It was beautiful, peaceful, not at all the kind of place one would expect to find danger. Noah approached the hollow tree cautiously, peering into the darkness within. At first, he could see nothing but shadows. Then his eyes adjusted, and he gasped. Inside the tree was not just the bear and its bag, but what looked like a small home. The floor was lined with soft moss and leaves, carefully arranged. There were strange collections of items, shiny rocks, colorful feathers, a tarnished belt buckle, and even a small, cracked mirror that reflected Noah's surprised face back at him. The bear was sitting in the center of this unusual den, the bag now open before it. Noah couldn't see what was inside from his position at the entrance, but whatever it was had the bear's complete attention. "Bear house," Noah whispered, taking a tentative step forward. The bear's head snapped up, but there was no aggression in its posture. Instead, it made a soft grunting sound and used its nose to push something toward the entrance where Noah stood. An invitation. Noah's curiosity overcame his growing unease. He stepped fully into the hollow tree, the cool shade a stark contrast to the warm sunlight outside. The bear watched him, dark eyes reflecting a startling intelligence. As Noah drew closer, he could finally see what was in the bag. His eyes widened in surprise. This was not what he had expected at all. The torn bag had spilled open to reveal its contents. Old photographs, yellowed with age and worn at the edges, a small book with a leather cover, a tarnished metal tag on a chain, and strangest of all, a faded red piece of fabric that looked like it might have once been part of a uniform. Noah's small fingers reached out, touching one of the photographs. In it, a smiling man in military attire stood beside a tiny bear cub. The man's arm was draped protectively around the small animal. Noah didn't understand the significance, but even at his young age, he could sense that these items told a story that somehow connected the man in the photo to the massive bear sitting before him now. The bear watched Noah intently, making no move to stop the child from examining the treasures it had guarded so carefully. It was as if it had been waiting for someone, anyone, to discover its secret, to understand its burden. In the distance, faint but growing louder, came the sound of voices calling Noah's name. His parents had discovered his trail and were following it into the forest, but Noah barely heard them. He was captivated by the photograph, by the connection he couldn't quite understand but somehow felt. The bear's ears perked up at the sound of approaching humans. It looked at Noah, then at the entrance to the hollow tree, then back at the items spread before them. For a moment, bear and child stared at each other, sharing a silent understanding that transcended species and age. Then the bear did something truly astonishing. It gently nudged the metal tag, dog tags, though Noah didn't know that term, toward the boy. It was as if the bear was entrusting him with part of its treasure, passing on a responsibility it had carried for what must have been many years. Noah picked up the tags, the metal cool against his warm palm. Something was engraved on them, letters and numbers that he couldn't read. He looked up at the bear, questions in his eyes that he didn't have words to ask. The voices were getting closer. "Noah, Noah, where are you?" The bear's head tilted toward the sound, and for the first time, Noah saw something like sadness in its dark eyes. The creature began to gather the photographs and other items, gently tucking them back into the tattered bag with its clumsy paws. But it left the dog tags in Noah's small hand, closing the child's fingers around them with a surprisingly gentle touch of its massive paw. "Noah." His father's voice was close now, filled with panic and fear. Noah looked down at the gift in his hand, then back at the bear. "Thank you," he said softly, one of the phrases his parents had taught him to say when given something. The bear huffed softly in response, then moved toward the back of the hollow tree. To Noah's surprise, there was another opening there, hidden in the shadows, an escape route. The bear slipped through with its bag of treasures, pausing only once to look back at the small human child who had followed it so fearlessly. Then it was gone, disappearing into the forest just as Jacob Bennet burst into the clearing, his face red from exertion and terror. "Noah!" Jacob cried, rushing toward the hollow tree. He scooped his son into his arms, holding him tight against his chest. "What were you thinking? We've been searching everywhere." Lily appeared moments later, tears streaming down her face as she joined the embrace. "Oh, thank God, Noah, you scared us so much." Noah squirmed in his father's grip, pointing toward the back of the hollow tree. "Bear," he said simply. "Nice bear." Jacob and Lily exchanged horrified glances. A bear? Their toddler had been following a bear through the forest? The thought sent shivers down their spines. "There's no bear now, honey," Lily said soothingly, checking her son for injuries. She found only the small scratches on his palms from his earlier fall. "Let's get you back to the cabin." Noah opened his small fist, revealing the metal tags the bear had given him. "Bear present," he insisted. Jacob took the tags from his son's hand, his face growing pale as he read the name and information stamped into the metal. He showed them to Lily, whose hand flew to her mouth in shock. "Marshall Ethan J.," Jacob read aloud. "These are military dog tags, but they're old, very old." "How did he get these?" Lily whispered, looking around the clearing nervously. Noah patted his father's cheek to get his attention, then pointed again to the back of the tree. "Bear, friend," he said with the absolute certainty that only a child could possess. "Bear sad." Jacob and Lily didn't understand then. How could they? They hadn't seen what Noah had seen, the photographs, the careful collection of memories, the gentle way the bear had handled its treasures. They didn't know about the man in the photograph with the bear cub, or the story that connected them all. But as they carried Noah back through the forest toward the safety of their cabin, the dog tags clutched tightly in Jacob's hand. They sensed that something extraordinary had happened, something they might never fully understand. Noah looked back over his father's shoulder, hoping for one last glimpse of his massive new friend. For just a moment he thought he saw a dark shape watching from between the trees, but it was gone so quickly he couldn't be sure. The little boy who had been nicknamed Baby Veteran had no way of knowing that his adventure was just beginning. The bear's gift would set in motion events that would eventually reveal a story more incredible than anyone could have imagined. A story of loyalty, loss, and a promise kept across decades and species. But for now, Noah was content to be carried home in his parents' loving arms, the memory of the bear and its strange treasures already becoming dreamlike in his young mind. Yet the image of the man and the bear cub in that old photograph remained clear, as did the feeling that he had been chosen for some important purpose. As they reached the edge of the forest, Noah looked down at the dog tags now hanging from his father's pocket. Even without understanding what they were, he knew they were important. They were in another clearing, but this one was unlike anything they had seen before. It was a perfect circle of land surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to stand guard, their massive trunks creating a natural wall. The ground was covered with wildflowers of every color, swaying gently in the breeze. And in the center stood a small, weathered cabin, nearly hidden beneath decades of climbing vines and moss. "Where are we?" Lily asked in wonder as Jacob helped her and Noah out of the tunnel. Jacob looked around, trying to get his bearings. "We must be deeper in the mountains. I don't think this place is on any of the trail maps." The bear had already reached the cabin, waiting by the door that hung partially open on rusted hinges. The dog tag still dangled from its mouth, catching the sunlight and sending small flashes of brightness across the clearing. Noah squirmed until Lily set him down, then ran to the bear without hesitation. His small hand reached up to touch the great creature's fur with gentle reverence. The bear lowered its head, allowing the touch in a gesture so tender it brought tears to Lily's eyes. "We should be careful," Jacob said quietly, moving to join Noah. "We don't know what's in there." The bear turned and pushed the cabin door fully open with its nose, then stepped inside. Noah followed immediately, with Jacob right behind him. Lily hesitated only briefly before joining them. The interior of the cabin was a single room, dusty and dim, with sunlight filtering through cracks in the walls and a small window thick with grime. But it was not abandoned. Signs of long occupation were everywhere. A neatly made bed with a faded quilt, a small table with a kerosene lamp, shelves lined with books and jars, and a stone fireplace with ashes that looked relatively recent. "Someone's been living here," Jacob whispered, looking around in amazement. "Recently." The bear moved to the center of the room and gently placed the dog tags on a small wooden box that sat on the table. Then it looked at Noah and made a soft, encouraging sound. Noah approached the box, his parents close behind him. With careful hands, he lifted the lid. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its cover worn smooth by years of handling. Beside it was a small tarnished key. Jacob carefully lifted the journal out, opening it to the first page. The handwriting was neat but had the slight tremor of someone writing by lamplight. "April 18th, 1971, he read aloud. "Connor thinks I'm crazy for bringing Scout up here, but he doesn't understand. This cub is the only living thing that doesn't look at me like I'm broken. After Vietnam, I thought I'd never feel peace again. But here, with Scout, I'm starting to remember who I was before the war." Lily put her hand on Jacob's arm. "It's Ethan's journal." Jacob nodded, turning the page. "May 30th, 1971. Found something strange today while hiking with Scout near the North Ridge. A circle of stones that doesn't look natural. Dug a little and found what appears to be an old mine entrance, long collapsed. But there's something odd about it. The locals never mentioned any mining in this area." Noah pointed at the journal, then to the bear, who was watching them with intense focus. "Read more," the toddler urged. Jacob continued, skipping forward through the journal. "June 10th, 1971. I've cleared enough of the collapse to get inside the old mine. It's not what I expected. The tunnel seems too smooth, too perfect to be made by miners, and the markings on the walls, I've never seen anything like them. Scout refuses to enter, which isn't like him. He waits at the entrance, watching." The bear made a soft whining sound, moving restlessly around the small cabin. "July 2nd, 1971, Jacob read, his voice growing more intense. "I've gone deeper into the tunnel system. They branch out for miles under the mountain. And I've found something. I don't have words for it. A chamber with walls that glow with their own light. Patterns that shift when you look at them. It sounds impossible, but I know what I've seen. There's knowledge here left by someone. Not miners. Not anyone from around here. Maybe not anyone from here." Lily gasped softly. "What is he saying?" Jacob continued reading, his voice hushed. "July 15th, 1971. The authorities are coming tomorrow to take Scout. I won't let them. We're going into the mountains tonight. I've packed supplies, enough to last until we can find a new place, far from here. But first, I need to go back to the chamber. One last time. There's something there I need to understand." He turned the page, but the next entry was dated much later. August 30th, 1971. If anyone finds this journal, know that what happened was my choice. The chamber showed me things I wasn't prepared to see. Knowledge not meant for us, not yet. I underestimated the toll it would take. My body is failing now. The radiation, or whatever it is that powers the chamber, has changed me. I can feel it in my blood, burning. Scout stays by my side, loyal to the end. I've built this cabin far from any trail, where we can live out whatever time I have left in peace. The bear made a mournful sound, moving to a corner of the cabin where a small chest sat partially hidden under the bed. It nudged the chest with its nose, looking back at Noah. The toddler went to the chest, examining it carefully. There was a keyhole in the front. Without hesitation, Noah picked up the small key from the box and tried it in the lock. It turned with a rusty click. Inside the chest were more photographs, letters, and at the bottom, a folded American flag in a triangular case. But most surprising was a small device unlike anything they had ever seen. A metallic disc with strange symbols etched into its surface, similar to the ones Jacob had just read about in the journal. "What is this?" Lily whispered, afraid to touch it. Jacob turned back to the journal, flipping to the final pages. October 4th, 1971. I don't have much strength left to write. The device from the chamber grows warmer each day. I think it's responding to something, maybe to Scout, who refuses to leave my side even to hunt. This loyal creature has shown me more humanity than I found in the war. I've taught him everything I could, how to find food, how to stay safe. And one final lesson: never leave a fallen soldier behind. My tags are in the tin box. Someday, someone might find them, might wonder what happened to Ethan Marshall. Scout will know what to do. The final entry was scrawled in a shaky hand. October 12th, 1971. The light is coming. I can see it through the walls now. I'm not afraid anymore. Scout understands more than any animal should. More than seems possible. Whatever is in that chamber, it changed him too. I've asked him to watch over this place, to protect what I've found until someone worthy comes, someone innocent enough to see with new eyes. I don't know how long that will be, but Scout will wait, he promised me. The journal ended there. Jacob closed it gently, looking up at the bear with new understanding. "Scout," he said softly, "you kept your promise." The bear, Scout, made a sound deep in his throat, a rumble that seemed to contain decades of loneliness and devotion. He moved to Noah, gently nuzzling the child's hair. Noah reached up without fear, placing his small hands on either side of the bear's massive head. "Not alone now," he said simply. Lily wiped tears from her eyes. How is this possible? A bear couldn't live this long. Jacob looked thoughtfully at the strange device in the chest. According to Ethan's journal, whatever he found in that chamber changed both of them. Maybe in ways he didn't fully understand. Scout moved to the cabin door, looking back at them expectantly. "I think he wants to show us something else," Jacob said. They followed the bear outside and across the clearing to the edge of the trees, where a small mound of earth was marked with a weathered wooden cross. Wildflowers grew thick around it, as if they had been carefully tended for years. Scout sat beside the grave, his posture one of unmistakable grief and fidelity. After all these decades, he was still keeping vigil over his human friend. Noah walked to the bear and wrapped his arms as far as they would go around its neck. "Good bear," he whispered. "Best friend." Scout made a soft, broken sound, lowering his massive head to rest on Noah's shoulder. It was a moment of such profound connection that neither Jacob nor Lily dared speak. afraid to break whatever magic was happening between the ancient bear and their extraordinarily perceptive child. Finally, Noah stepped back, looking into Scout's eyes with wisdom far beyond his years. "Time to rest now," he said gently. "Found Ethan. Safe now." Scout looked at the toddler for a long moment, as if considering his words. Then, with what seemed like enormous effort, the bear turned and looked one last time at the grave of his beloved human. He made a sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whimper, that somehow contained all the years of his lonely vigil, all the devotion of a promise kept against impossible odds. Then Scout turned back to Noah and lowered himself to the ground, his massive body trembling with exhaustion. Noah sat beside him, small hand stroking the bear's graying fur. Scout laid his head in the toddler's lap, his dark eyes fixed on Noah's face with an expression of profound peace. Jacob and Lily moved closer, kneeling beside the unlikely pair. "What's happening?" Lily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jacob looked at the bear's labored breathing, at the way he seemed to be relaxing more deeply with each gentle stroke of Noah's hand. I think he was waiting for this, for someone to understand, to release him from his promise." Noah looked up at his parents, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of sadness and joy. "Scout, go to Ethan now," he said simply. As if responding to the child's words, Scout's eyes began to close, his breathing growing slower and more peaceful. The massive body that had carried the burden of an impossible promise for so long seemed to grow lighter somehow, as if releasing decades of grief and loneliness. With one final, contented sigh, the bear grew still, his long journey finally complete. Noah leaned down and pressed his forehead against Scout's, tears falling from his eyes onto the bear's fur. "Thank you for stories," he whispered. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. A shaft of sunlight broke through the canopy above, illuminating the clearing in a golden glow that seemed too perfect, too focused to be natural. It touched the grave, the cabin, the still form of Scout, and finally, Noah himself, bathing the toddler in light that made him appear almost translucent. For just a heartbeat, so brief they would later wonder if they had imagined it, Jacob and Lily saw two figures standing at the edge of the clearing, a young soldier in a faded uniform and a small black bear cub at his side. The soldier raised his hand in a gesture of gratitude, and then both figures dissolved into the dappled forest light. The moment passed. The clearing returned to normal, the unusual quality of the light fading to ordinary afternoon sunshine. But something had changed, something fundamental in the fabric of the place, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. "Did you see?" Lily began, her voice trembling. Jacob nodded slowly, unable to find words for what they had witnessed. Noah stood up, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. He looked older somehow, as if the experience had accelerated something in his development. "Ethan and Scout together now," he said with quiet certainty. "No more sad." They buried Scout beside Ethan's grave, marking the spot with stones arranged in a circle. Noah insisted on placing the dog tags between the two graves, a final reunion of companions separated too long by death and duty. The strange device from Ethan's chest remained a mystery. After much discussion, Jacob and Lily decided to entrust it to Ranger Reed, along with Ethan's journal and the coordinates of the clearing. Some secrets were too important to keep hidden, but also too dangerous to be handled without care. Connor Adams wept when they told him what they had found, his aged hands trembling as he held the photographs of his long-lost friend. "I always knew Ethan found something special up there," he said, his voice breaking. "And that bear, that remarkable bear, kept his promise all these years." He looked at Noah with wonder. "And you, little one." Somehow, you understood. Noah simply nodded, solemn and certain in a way that continued to astonish his parents. As their vacation came to an end and they prepared to return to the city, something had shifted in their family. The experience had changed them all, but none more than Noah. The nickname Baby Veteran had taken on new meaning, now seeming less like a joke and more like a recognition of something true about their extraordinary child. On their final morning, Noah insisted on visiting the clearing one last time. Standing between the twin graves, he placed a small wooden soldier, his favorite toy, between them. "For keeping safe," he explained to his parents. As they turned to leave, Noah looked back once more at the peaceful clearing where an impossible friendship had endured beyond death, beyond time, beyond the ordinary boundaries of nature itself. "Story not over," he said quietly, taking his parents' hands. Jacob and Lily exchanged glances over their son's head, recognizing the truth in his words. The mystery of Ethan's discovery in the mountains, the strange device with its unknown origins, the extraordinary bond between a man and a bear that had somehow transcended death itself, these were threads of a larger story that was still unfolding. And at the center of it all was their son, who had somehow been chosen to witness the final chapter of one tale and the beginning of another. As they walked back through the forest, Noah between them, the morning light filtering through the leaves overhead, Lily thought she heard something in the distance, a soft harmony of sounds that might have been a man's laughter and a bear's contented growl. The forest seemed to breathe around them, alive with memories and possibilities. And though they were leaving this place, something of it would remain with them always, carried in the heart of a small boy who had seen with eyes unclouded by age or convention, who had recognized a soul in need of peace and had known exactly how to provide it. The path ahead was long, winding back to their everyday lives, but they walked it together, changed by what they had witnessed, by the reminder that there are bonds that transcend understanding, loyalties that outlast lifetimes, and stories waiting in the wilderness for those brave enough or innocent enough to discover them. And as they reached the edge of the forest, where the trees gave way to the open yard of their rented cabin, Noah looked up at the cloudless sky with a smile of pure joy. "Bear and man watching," he said confidently, "always watching." Jacob and Lily followed his gaze upward to where two clouds had formed in the otherwise clear blue, one large and rounded, the other smaller and more defined. For just a moment before the wind reshaped them, they looked remarkably like a bear and a man, walking side by side across the endless sky. Noah nodded, satisfied, and squeezed his parents' hands. Whatever adventures awaited them in the future, whatever mysteries remained to be solved, they would face them together. A family forever changed by the story of a baby veteran, a faithful bear, and the enduring power of a promise kept. The end a key to a mystery, a connection to the past, and to the bear who had trusted him enough to share its secret. Back at the hollow tree, silence had fallen once more. But deep in the forest, a bear with a tattered bag continued its lonely vigil, its burden lightened just a little by the encounter with a fearless child who had followed where others would have fled. The cabin felt smaller now, somehow changed by the morning's events. Noah sat at the kitchen table, his legs dangling from a chair that was too tall for him, sipping warm cocoa from his favorite blue sippy cup. His parents moved around him in a blur of nervous energy, exchanging worried glances and whispered concerns. Jacob turned the dog tags over and over in his hands, studying them like they might contain answers to questions he hadn't even formed yet. "Ethan J. Marshall," he read again, tracing the stamped letters with his finger. Serial number, blood type. These are genuine military issue, Lily. From the Vietnam era, by the look of them. Lily leaned against the counter, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. But how did Noah end up with them? He keeps saying a bear gave them to him, but that's impossible. Jacob finished for her. He looked at their son, who was now drawing with crayons, his small face scrunched in concentration as he created a brown blob with 4 legs. Noah, can you tell us again about the bear? Noah looked up, his eyes bright with remembered adventure. Big bear, he said, spreading his arms wide to indicate size. Bag, pictures. His limited vocabulary couldn't express everything he'd seen, but his gestures were emphatic. Pictures? Lily asked, crouching beside her son. You saw pictures? Noah nodded vigorously. Man and baby bear, he said, pointing to his drawing. He'd added a stick figure next to the brown blob. Jacob and Lily exchanged another look. This one filled with confusion, and a growing sense that there was more to this story than a toddler's imagination. I think we should call the ranger station, Jacob said finally. These dog tags belong to someone. Maybe there's a record of an Ethan Marshall in this area, and we should report the bear sighting too, just to be safe. Lily nodded, though her eyes remained troubled. Do you think, she began, then shook her head, dismissing the thought as too bizarre to voice. What? Jacob urged. Nothing, she said. It's silly. I was just thinking about how Noah said the bear was sad, like he could tell what it was feeling. Jacob placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He's a perceptive kid, always has been. That's why Grandpa calls him baby veteran, those old soul eyes of his. But bears don't feel sad, Lily. They're wild animals. Noah looked up from his drawing. His crayon paused mid-stroke. Bear sad, he insisted again, with such certainty that both parents fell silent. The call to the ranger station later that afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Ranger Savannah Reed arrived just before sunset, her green uniform crisp despite the long drive up the mountain roads. She was younger than they expected, probably in her early 30s, with copper-colored hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes that missed nothing. So, you found these in the forest? She asked, examining the dog tags with professional interest. She sat at their kitchen table, declining offers of coffee or tea, but accepting a glass of water. Our son did, Jacob explained, nodding toward Noah, who was playing with blocks in the living room. He says a bear gave them to him. Ranger Reed's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained professionally neutral. A bear, she repeated. Can you show me exactly where this happened? Jacob spread out a trail map on the table, tracing their search path and circling the clearing with the hollow tree. About a mile east of here, there's a lightning-struck oak with a hollow large enough to walk into. That's where we found him. Reed studied the map, her finger tapping thoughtfully on the circled area. I know that spot, she said. Old-growth forest. We've had bear sightings in that region before, but no aggressive encounters. She looked up. Your son wasn't hurt at all. Not a scratch from the bear, Lily said, still sounding bewildered by this fact. Just some scrapes on his hands from falling during his adventure. Reed nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notebook. The name on these tags, Ethan Marshall, it's familiar. She flipped through several pages before finding what she was looking for. Thought so? There's an old story in these parts about a soldier who went missing in these mountains in the early 1970s, just after returning from Vietnam. Jacob leaned forward. Missing? Was he ever found? No, Reed said, closing her notebook. The official report says he went hiking alone and never returned. Search parties combed these mountains for weeks, but... She shrugged. The wilderness is vast. People get lost. And you think these could be his tags? Lily asked, her voice hushed. It's possible, Reed admitted. The timing fits, but how they ended up with a bear, and how that bear ended up giving them to your son... She shook her head. That part is harder to explain. Noah had wandered over, drawn by the conversation. He pointed to the dog tags on the table. Bear, keep safe, he said with simple confidence. The adults fell silent, looking at the toddler with varying degrees of confusion and wonder. Reed was the first to speak. There's someone you might want to talk to, she said slowly, as if making a decision. An old man who lives on the other side of the mountain. Connor Adams. He was part of the original search party for Marshall, and he's been the local historian for decades. If anyone knows the full story, it would be him. Do you think he'd talk to us? Jacob asked. Reed nodded. I can take you there tomorrow, if you'd like. It's about an hour's drive. Later that night, after Noah had been tucked into bed and Ranger Reed had departed with a promise to return in the morning, Jacob and Lily sat on the cabin's porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Do you think there's really a connection? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Between the missing soldier and the bear? Jacob sighed, wrapping an arm around his wife's shoulders. I don't know what to think anymore, but Noah saw something out there, something real. Inside his small bedroom, Noah dreamed. In his dream, he was back in the forest, but this time he wasn't alone. The bear walked beside him, leading him deeper into the trees than he had gone before. And somehow, in the strange logic of dreams, Noah could understand what the bear was trying to tell him. Find him, the bear seemed to say. Help me find him. Noah woke with a start, the dream still vivid in his mind. Outside his window, the forest loomed dark and mysterious. For a moment, he thought he saw a shadow moving among the trees, a large shape that paused, as if looking toward the cabin before disappearing into the night. The toddler pressed his small hand against the cool glass, a strange sense of purpose filling his young heart. Help Bear, he whispered into the darkness. Morning brought clear skies and Ranger Reed, who arrived just after breakfast in her Forest Service truck. Jacob had explained their plan to visit Connor Adams to Noah, trying to use simple terms the toddler would understand. We're going to see a man who might know about your bear friend, he said, helping Noah into his car seat. Noah nodded seriously, clutching his toy soldier in one hand and the dog tags, which his parents had decided to let him hold for the journey, in the other. The drive took them deeper into the mountains, along winding roads that grew progressively narrower and rougher. Lily kept glancing back at Noah, who stared out the window with unusual intensity, as if searching for something among the endless trees. He's been quiet this morning, she murmured to Jacob. Not like him at all. Jacob nodded, his own concern evident. Maybe yesterday took more out of him than we realized. In the back seat, Noah continued his silent vigil, small fingers tracing the raised letters on the dog tags. He didn't have words to explain what he was feeling, the strange connection to the bear, the sense that something important had been entrusted to him. But he knew with absolute certainty that this journey was necessary. Connor Adams lived in a small, weathered cabin, much like their rental, but with decades of permanent habitation etched into its very foundations. A wide porch wrapped around three sides, cluttered with rocking chairs, potted plants, and what appeared to be antique mining equipment repurposed as decoration. The man himself was as weathered as his home, tall and thin, with a shock of white hair and a beard to match. He must have been in his 80s, but he moved with the deliberate energy of someone who had spent a lifetime outdoors. His eyes, though clouded with cataracts, were sharp with intelligence. "Savannah," he greeted the ranger with a nod. "Been a while. These the folks who found Ethan's tags?" Reed nodded. "This is Jacob and Lily Bennett and their son Noah. The Bennetts are renting the Talbot cabin for the month." "Talbot cabin," Adams repeated, his gaze moving to Noah with particular interest. "That's less than 2 miles from where they found him, you know." "Found who?" Jacob asked. Adams gestured toward a cluster of rocking chairs. "Sit, this isn't a short story." Once they were settled, Adams leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Ethan Marshall was my best friend," he said without preamble. "We grew up together in these mountains, joined the Army together in '68, Vietnam." He said the word like it carried physical weight. "We made it back when a lot didn't, but Ethan, he came back different." "PTSD?" Lily suggested gently. Adams nodded. "We didn't call it that back then. Shell shock, maybe. But it was more than that. He couldn't settle, couldn't sleep. Said the only place he felt any peace was in the forest." The old man's eyes drifted toward the tree line. He'd go hiking for days at a time. Said the wilderness made sense in a way people didn't anymore. He paused, reaching for a glass of water on the small table beside him. "About 6 months after we got back, Ethan found an orphaned bear cub while hiking. Mother had been killed by poachers. Tiny thing, barely old enough to walk." Noah perked up at this, leaning forward in his mother's lap. "Ethan brought that cub home, bottle-fed it himself. Named it Scout. Said he was going to raise it until it was old enough to survive on its own." Adams shook his head. "I told him it was a bad idea, wild animal and all, but he wouldn't listen. Said Scout needed him." "What happened?" Jacob asked, though he suspected he already knew. "For about 3 months, Ethan and that bear were inseparable. He'd take it hiking, taught it to fish in the streams, even had a special pack made to carry it when they went on longer treks." Adams smiled faintly at the memory. "Never seen anything like it, before or since. That bear followed him like a dog, slept at the foot of his bed." His expression darkened. "Then the wildlife authorities got wind of it, came to take Scout away, said Ethan was breaking all kinds of laws keeping a wild bear, said they'd relocate it to a sanctuary." Noah made a distressed sound, and Lily hugged him closer. "Ethan wouldn't have it. Night before they were supposed to come, he packed up some supplies and took Scout into the mountains. Left a note saying he was going to find somewhere they could live in peace." Adams took another sip of water, his hand slightly trembling now. "That was the last anyone saw of him. When he didn't come back after a week, I reported him missing. Search parties combed these mountains for a month. Found his campsite eventually, up near Black Claw Ridge. His backpack was there, some supplies, but no sign of Ethan or the bear." "And they were never found?" Reed asked softly, though she clearly knew the answer. Adams shook his head. "I kept looking long after the official search was called off. Every summer for years, I'd spend my vacation days hiking these mountains, calling his name." He sighed heavily. "Eventually, I had to accept he was gone." There was a moment of silence as they all absorbed the story. Then Noah slid from his mother's lap and walked deliberately to Adams, holding out the dog tags. Adams took them with gnarled fingers, tears welling in his cloudy eyes. "Where did you find these?" he whispered. Before either parent could answer, Noah spoke with clear purpose. "Bear, give. Big bear with bag. Pictures of man and baby bear." Adams went very still, his gaze locked on the child's face. What did you say?" Jacob explained what had happened the previous day, Noah's disappearance, following the bear to the hollow tree, finding him there with the dog tags. As he spoke, Adam's expression transformed from shock to wonder to something that looked almost like reverence. When Jacob finished, the old man sat back in his chair, the dog tags clutched tightly in his fist. "All these years," he murmured. "All these years, and Scout was keeping his promise." "His promise?" Lily asked. Adams nodded slowly. "The last thing in Ethan's note, the one he left when they disappeared. He wrote that he'd taught Scout to never leave a fallen soldier behind. It was a joke between us, from our army days." His voice broke. "I never understood what he meant by writing that, until now." Noah reached out and patted the old man's knee, a gesture of comfort that seemed impossibly mature for a toddler. "Bear sad," he said again, his earlier refrain. Adams looked at the child with newfound respect. "Yes, I expect he would be," he said softly, "carrying that burden all alone for so long." Ranger Reed leaned forward. "Mr. Adams, are you suggesting that the bear Noah encountered might actually be Scout?" "That's impossible. Bears don't live that long." Adams shrugged. "Black bears can live 30 years in the wild, longer in some cases. It's been just over 50 years since Ethan disappeared. Could be Scout's offspring. Animals pass down behaviors, territories." He looked at Noah. "But this bear had Ethan's tags, had photos of them together, been keeping them safe all this time." "But why give them to Noah now?" Jacob wondered aloud. "After all these years." Adams studied Noah thoughtfully. "Some spirits recognize each other," he said cryptically. "Maybe the bear saw something in your boy, something that reminded him of Ethan." Lily tightened her arms around Noah protectively, not entirely comfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Adams?" The old man leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "I've lived in these mountains my whole life, seen things that can't be easily explained. The relationship between Ethan and that bear cub was one of them." He focused on Noah again. "Your boy here might be another." Noah stared back at Adams with solemn eyes, as if they were sharing a secret understanding that the adults couldn't quite grasp. "There's something else," Adams said after a moment. "Something I never told the search parties back then. The day before Ethan disappeared with Scout, he told me he'd found something in the mountains, something important." He hesitated. "He wouldn't tell me what it was, said it wasn't safe to talk about. But he was excited, said it could change everything." Reed frowned. "Change what, exactly?" "He never said, but Ethan wasn't prone to exaggeration. If he thought it was important." Adams trailed off. "I've often wondered if whatever he found had something to do with his disappearance." Noah suddenly pointed toward the forest behind Adam's cabin. "Bear there," he said with quiet certainty. All the adults turned to look. The tree line remained still and empty, but a strange tension had fallen over the group, as if they were being watched. "I don't see anything," Jacob said, squinting. Adams rose slowly from his chair. "Bears are good at not being seen when they don't want to be," he said. "But they're always there, watching. Been that way since Ethan vanished. Sometimes when I'm sitting out here at dusk, I get the feeling I'm not alone." He turned to Noah. "Your boy sees what we don't, or maybe what we've forgotten how to see." As they prepared to leave, Adams handed the dog tags back to Noah. "These belong with you now," he said gravely. "Scout chose you for a reason, maybe to finally finish what Ethan started." Noah accepted the tags solemnly, closing his small fingers around them as he had in the hollow tree. The drive back to their cabin was subdued. each adult lost in their own thoughts about Adams's strange tale. Even Reed, who had initially seemed skeptical, was quiet and contemplative. Noah fell asleep in his car seat, the dog tag still clutched in his hand, but his sleep was not peaceful. He twitched and murmured, small brows furrowed as if troubled by dreams. Lily reached back to stroke his hair. "He's exhausted," she whispered to Jacob. "This has all been too much excitement for someone his age." Jacob nodded, but his expression was thoughtful rather than concerned. "Have you noticed how different he's been since yesterday? More focused. Almost like—" "Like what?" Lily prompted when he didn't continue. Jacob shook his head. "I don't know. Like he's on a mission or something." From the driver's seat, Reed spoke up. "Children are more sensitive to their surroundings than we give them credit for, especially at his age, when the boundaries between imagination and reality are still fluid." She glanced in the rearview mirror at the sleeping child. "But I have to admit, this whole situation is unusual." When they arrived back at the cabin, Noah was still sleeping deeply. Jacob gently carried him inside and laid him in his bed, carefully extracting the dog tags from his grip and placing them on the bedside table. The toddler stirred but didn't wake, his breathing deep and even. As evening approached, Ranger Reed prepared to leave. "I'll look into the official records about Marshall's disappearance," she promised. "There might be details Adams has forgotten or never knew, and I'll check recent bear sightings in the area too." "You don't really think this bear could be the same one from Adams's story, do you?" Lily asked. Reed considered her answer carefully. "Scientifically speaking, it's unlikely, but—" She looked toward the darkening forest. "I've worked in these mountains for 12 years now. I've learned that sometimes the scientific explanation isn't the only one worth considering." After she left, Jacob and Lily sat at the kitchen table, picking at the dinner they'd prepared but had little appetite for. "What do we do now?" Lily asked finally. Jacob ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not sure there's anything to do. Noah had an unusual encounter with a bear that, for whatever reason, had some old military tags. Adams has a story that sort of explains it, but—" He shrugged. "We're on vacation. Maybe we should just enjoy the rest of our time here and let it go." Lily didn't look convinced. "You didn't see Noah's face when Adams was talking about Ethan and Scout. It was like he already knew the story." "He's 2, Lily. He barely understands what we're saying most of the time." "Then how do you explain him finding those tags, following a bear into the forest without getting hurt?" Jacob had no answer for that. In his room, Noah woke with a start. The shadows had lengthened, casting his room in shades of purple and blue. He sat up, immediately noticing the absence of the dog tags in his hand. His eyes searched the room until he spotted them on the bedside table, glinting in the fading light. Carefully, he climbed down from his bed and retrieved them, slipping the chain over his head so they hung against his small chest. Then he went to the window and looked out at the forest. Something moved among the trees, a large, dark shape that seemed to be waiting. Noah pressed his palm against the glass, a strange sense of determination filling him. In his young mind, fragmented thoughts were coming together. The bear's sadness, the old photos, Adam's story about Ethan and Scout, and something else, something from his dreams that he couldn't quite remember but felt important. "Help Bear find him," he whispered again, his breath fogging the glass. Outside, the shape moved, then disappeared deeper into the trees, but Noah knew it would be back. The bear, Scout, needed his help, and somehow he knew what he had to do. The night passed quietly, but dawn brought a new development. Jacob woke early, stepping onto the porch with a cup of coffee to watch the sunrise. What he found instead made him call for Lily in a hushed, urgent voice. On the porch steps lay a small, worn piece of fabric, faded red, frayed at the edges. Jacob recognized it immediately as similar to what Noah had described seeing in the bear's bag. Beside it was a tarnished button with what looked like a military insignia. "Where did these come from?" Lily asked, staring at the items with wide eyes. Jacob looked toward the tree line. "I think our bear visitor came back last night." They brought the items inside, laying them on the kitchen table next to the dog tags, which Noah had insisted on wearing around his neck. The toddler examined the fabric and button with serious concentration, touching them gently as if they might break. "Bear present," he said, looking up at his parents. Jacob and Lily exchanged glances. There was no denying it now. Something unusual was happening, something connected to their son. "I think we need to go back to the hollow tree," Jacob said finally. "Maybe there are more clues there about what happened to Ethan Marshall." Lily looked uncertain. "Is that safe? Taking Noah back out there when we know there's a bear in the area?" "The bear had multiple opportunities to hurt him yesterday and didn't," Jacob pointed out. "And I'll be with him the whole time." He looked at his son. "Besides, I think Noah wants to go back." The toddler nodded vigorously, his expression surprisingly determined for one so young. They set out mid-morning, with Jacob carrying Noah in a backpack carrier and Lily following close behind, a walking stick in one hand and her phone in the other, GPS tracking their route. Noah wore the dog tags outside his jacket, where they caught the sunlight as they moved through the dappled shade of the forest. Following their path from the previous day was easier than expected. Noah pointed confidently whenever they reached a fork or unclear section of trail, as if he'd walked these woods his entire life instead of just once before. "How does he know the way so well?" Lily whispered to Jacob. Jacob shook his head slightly. "I don't know, but let's trust him for now." They reached the clearing with the hollow tree just before noon. It looked different in the full light of day, less mysterious, more simply part of the ancient forest around it. Jacob set Noah down, and the toddler immediately ran to the tree, disappearing inside its hollow trunk. "Noah, wait," Lily called, hurrying after him. Inside, they found Noah already examining the interior space, running his small hands over the walls of the hollow as if searching for something. The strange collection of items they'd glimpsed yesterday, the shiny rocks, feathers, and other treasures, were still there, arranged in what now seemed like a deliberately decorative pattern. "Look at this place," Jacob said softly. "It's like someone's been living here, or at least spending a lot of time here." Lily crouched down, examining a small pile of what appeared to be animal bones. Clean, white, arranged in a neat stack. Not someone. Something. Noah had moved to the back of the hollow, where the bear had disappeared the day before. He was pushing at the bark, his small face concentrated with effort. "Noah, honey, what are you doing?" Lily asked, moving to join him. The toddler looked up at her, frustration evident in his expression. "Door," he said, pointing to what appeared to be just another section of the tree's interior. Jacob came over, examining the area Noah was indicating. At first glance, it looked like the rest of the hollow. Rough bark, shadows, nothing unusual. But as he looked closer, he noticed something odd about the pattern of the wood grain. "Wait a minute," he murmured, pressing his hand against the bark. To his surprise, a section moved slightly under the pressure. "There is something here." Excited, he applied more force, and a hidden panel swung inward, revealing a dark space beyond. Lily gasped. "Is that a passage?" Jacob pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it into the opening. A crude tunnel stretched away from them, disappearing into darkness. It was low. An adult would have to crawl, but solidly constructed, with wooden supports bracing the earthen walls. Someone built this, Jacob said in wonder. Recently enough that it hasn't collapsed. Noah was already trying to enter the tunnel, but Lily held him back. "No, honey, we don't know where it leads or if it's safe." The toddler squirmed in her grasp, pointing insistently. Bear went. "Find Ethan." Jacob and Lily looked at each other, the implications of Noah's words sinking in. Someone, or something, had maintained this hidden passage for years, and if Adam's story was true, it might lead to answers about what had happened to Ethan Marshall. "We need to tell Ranger Reed about this," Lily said firmly. "This is way beyond us now." Jacob nodded, already pulling out his phone to call, but there was no signal inside the hollow tree. "I'll try outside," he said, stepping back into the clearing. While he was gone, Lily held Noah close, looking around the hollow with new eyes. What had seemed like a bear's random collection of trinkets now appeared more deliberate, almost like memorials or keepsakes. Noah pointed to a small cracked frame half buried in moss. Lily carefully extracted it, wiping away decades of grime to reveal a photograph protected under the broken glass. Her breath caught. The image showed a young man in a military uniform, his arm around a small black bear cub that was looking up at him with what could only be described as adoration. The man was smiling broadly, his eyes bright with life. Written on the bottom corner in fading ink, "Ethan and Scout, June 1971. "Oh my God," Lily whispered, staring at the photograph. The resemblance between this bear cub and the massive creature Noah had described was impossible to ignore. The same white diamond-shaped patch on its chest, the same intelligent eyes. Jacob returned, his expression grim. "No signal. We'll have to go back to the cabin to call Reed." He saw the photograph in Lily's hands and stopped short. "What's that?" She handed it to him wordlessly. Jacob studied it, his skepticism visibly wavering. This makes Adams' story real." Noah tugged at his father's pant leg, pointing again to the tunnel. "Go now," he insisted. "Bear waiting." Jacob looked from the photograph to the tunnel entrance, then to his son's determined face. A decision was forming in his mind, one that Lily immediately recognized. "Jacob, no," she said firmly. "We are not going in there without help." "What if it collapses before we can bring help back?" he countered. "What if this is our only chance to find out what happened to Ethan?" He gestured at the photograph. "Lily, this isn't just some wild story anymore. There's evidence here of everything Adams told us. Evidence of a man who had a pet bear 50 years ago," she argued. "Not evidence that we should crawl into a mysterious tunnel in the middle of nowhere." Their argument was interrupted by a sound from outside the tree, a low rumbling growl that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. Noah's face brightened, and before either parent could stop him, he darted out of the hollow tree and into the clearing. "Noah!" they cried in unison, rushing after him. Outside, the clearing was no longer empty. Standing at the edge of the tree line, its massive body partially hidden by shadow, was the bear. It was even larger than Jacob had imagined from Noah's descriptions. A huge black bear with graying fur around its muzzle and a distinctive white diamond patch on its chest, just like in the photograph, only aged by decades. Noah stood in the center of the clearing, fearless, the dog tags glinting on his chest. The bear watched him, making no move to approach but not retreating either. There was an unmistakable intelligence in its gaze, a purpose that transcended normal animal behavior. Jacob and Lily froze, terrified to make any sudden movements that might provoke the creature. But Noah seemed completely at ease, taking a step toward the bear as if greeting an old friend. "Noah, don't move," Jacob whispered urgently. "Stay very still." But Noah didn't listen. He continued walking toward the bear, stopping only when he was halfway between his parents and the massive animal. Then he reached up and lifted the dog tags from around his neck, holding them out as if in offering. The bear's gaze fixed on the tags, and a sound that was almost a whimper escaped its throat. It took a step forward, then another, moving with surprising gentleness for such a large creature. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, every instinct screaming at her to rush forward and snatch her child away from danger. But something held her back, the same something that had Jacob standing frozen beside her. This moment felt sacred somehow, beyond their understanding or control. The bear stopped a few feet from Noah, lowering its massive head to the toddler's level. Noah showed no fear, only a strange combination of determination and compassion that seemed impossibly mature for his age. He held the tags higher. "Help find Ethan," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the clearing. The bear made a soft huffing sound, then extended its muzzle toward Noah's small hand. With extreme gentleness, it took the chain of the dog tags between its teeth, careful not to touch the child's skin. For a long moment, bear and boy stared at each other, communicating in some way that transcended words. Then the bear turned and walked toward the hollow tree, the tags dangling from its mouth. At the entrance, it stopped and looked back, as if waiting. Noah turned to his parents, his expression pleading. "Follow Bear," he said. "Please." Jacob and Lily looked at each other, years of rational thinking warring with the undeniable strangeness of what they were witnessing. This was not normal bear behavior, this was not a normal situation, and somehow their toddler was at the center of it all. "This is crazy," Lily whispered, but there was less conviction in her voice now. Jacob took her hand. "Maybe, but I think we need to see this through." He looked at Noah, then at the bear, waiting patiently by the hollow tree. "I think we're part of something important here." After a moment's hesitation, Lily nodded. Together they walked to where Noah stood, each taking one of his hands. As a family, they approached the hollow tree where the bear now waited, watching them with eyes that seemed to hold both wisdom and sorrow. The bear disappeared into the hollow, and they followed, stepping into the dim interior that now felt more like a sacred space than a wild animal's den. The hidden tunnel entrance stood open, a dark mouth leading into mystery. The bear had already entered, its massive form barely fitting through the passage. The dog tags glinted between its teeth as it looked back at them one more time, then continued forward, disappearing into the darkness. Jacob took a deep breath, flicking on his phone's flashlight again. "I'll go first," he said, getting down on his hands and knees. "Lily, you follow with Noah. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, we turn back immediately. Deal?" Lily nodded, gathering Noah into her arms. The toddler wrapped his arms around her neck, surprisingly calm despite the extraordinary circumstances. One by one, they entered the tunnel, leaving the sunlit clearing behind. Jacob led the way, the beam of his flashlight revealing earthen walls supported by wooden beams that looked weathered but solid. The air was cool and damp, smelling of soil and time. They crawled for what felt like ages, the tunnel sloping gradually downward. Occasionally, Jacob's light would catch glimpses of the bear ahead, its dark fur absorbing most of the beam. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes widening enough for them to crouch instead of crawl, sometimes narrowing until even Noah would have had difficulty standing upright. How much further? Lily whispered, her voice tight with the strain of crawling while carrying a toddler. Before Jacob could answer, the bear ahead of them stopped. They had reached what appeared to be the end of the tunnel, a dirt wall with no obvious exit. "Is this it?" Jacob murmured, confused. The bear turned in the confined space, an impressive feat given its size, and began pawing at the ceiling of the tunnel. Dirt and small rocks showered down, and Jacob realized it was digging through what must be another hidden entrance. He aimed his flashlight upward, revealing a thin layer of earth and roots that was giving way under the bear's powerful claws. Sunlight began to filter through as the bear broke through the surface, creating an opening large enough for it to haul itself up and out of the tunnel. "There's another exit," Jacob said, excitement building in his voice. "Come on." He reached the spot where the bear had dug through and stood up cautiously, his head and shoulders emerging into open air. He blinked in the sudden brightness, trying to orient himself,